Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Conservation in the Frontlines Online Regional Exchange Series, Women Leaders Paving the Way for Biodiversity Protection in the Coral Triangle. I'm very pleased to be your moderator today. My name is Willy Johani, Executive Director from the Coral Triangle Center. And this webinar has been organized in collaboration with the Regional Secretariat from the Coral Triangle Initiative for Coral Reefs, Fisheries and Food Security and the Nature Conservancy. As we all know, the Coral Triangle is the most diverse and biodiversity complex marine ecosystem on the planet. It spans across Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. And it's home for the world's most diverse and beautiful coral reefs and provides habitat for more than 2,500 species of reef fish. However, it's a lot of the marine biodiversity and the species are under threat. And today we will hear from several speakers around the region, how women leaders take a pivotal role in protecting this marine biodiversity and the endangered species in this region. For the first speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Dr. Kushari, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Secretariat for the Coral Triangle Initiative. Kushari obtained his PhD in ecology and Master of Science at the Tropical Coastal Management faculty from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. He has a total of over 35 years of working experience, 18 years in the government, and the remaining in teaching and consultation works. So please welcome Dr. Kushari to this important webinar and hear his welcome remarks for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, really, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, and also good evening to some parts of the country. In Manado now is in the morning. To really Johani, the Executive Director of CTC in Bali, Dr. Elizabeth McLeod, the Nature Conservancy, Madeline from the Gender and Equity Led in the Solomon Island, and Elena Molina, the Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology, University of the Philippines in Diliman. Dr. Eli Wibisono, Indonesia Fisheries Science and Policy Fellow of the Conservation International. Serena Adam, Shark Conservation Officer in the WWF Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat, I would like to warmly welcome you to the Conservation in the Frontlines Online Regional Exchange Series, Women Leaders Paving the Way for Biodiversity Protection in the Coral Triangle. In the Coral Triangle region, where the majority are artisanal communities, highly depend on marine resources, women significantly contribute to the ensuring of food security for their families and communities together with men. In the Coral Triangle region, women leaders also have emerged and continue to grow and contribute to sustain fisheries and marine conservation in the areas of research, public service, and advocacy related to community development and inclusion. CTI-CFF believes that women play a major involvement in the management of our marine and coastal ecosystem resources. Coral Triangle CTI-CFF, through the Women Leaders Forum, has significantly built capacity and raised awareness and among women to assist in addressing the challenges of marine conservation. This event aims to highlight successful women-led international initiatives in sustainable marine resource management and ocean protection of biodiversity, climate action, and marine protected area, and we are really honored to share our stories. In June and July, I attended the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, in which I have the chance during the meeting to attend the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion event organized during the running of that ocean conference. On the 30th June, I attended there, and it was attended also by the Americans, by the Africans activists of women gender equality. It was a productive meeting attending to this meeting. I also on the 27th June before that, I attended also the World Maritime University event on the empowering women. So I'm trying to get through the existence of CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat in particular on its involvement with women equality, gender equality. And this year, we, the Regional Secretariat, has published Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Policy in our organization among the 6 countries. Looking forward, CTI-CFF is resolute in ensuring gender equality and social inclusion to remain strong and practice in all aspects of CTI-CFF endeavors and initiatives, despite many challenges brought to us by the abnormal of COVID-19 in the past 2 years. We believe that this will improve livelihoods and social security and contribute to higher economic productivity and more efficient governance of marine resources with the sharing of the women among men in leading these issues. I thank you here for your expertise and cooperation, and I wish you a productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kashari, for your inspiring welcome remarks. And we thank you for your relentless support to the Women Leaders Forum and your support to the Gender Equality Social Inclusion strategy that has been adopted by all 6 countries in the Coral Triangle region. So thank you so much, Dr. Kashari, for being with us today. And I hope you can stay a bit longer to hear about all the other great work that the women leaders are doing in the Coral Triangle region.
I wish I could stay until the end, but there's a equitable engagement. But this is recorded, so my office will pass to me later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kashari. So before introducing the other speakers, we have a short presentation from the Coral Triangle Center. Can you put it up, please? Thank you. Just to reiterate again, the biodiversity, the sheer biodiversity of this epicenter for marine species. Next, please. So here you see the biodiversity map of the Coral Triangle region. In the dark red, you see the 6 countries represented: Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. And they harbor the most diverse reefs on the planet. And this has now been recognized globally by scientists, as well as by the 6 heads of states to really collaborate and preserve those rich coastal marine ecosystems. Next, please. Just to highlight also again the biodiversity, we have 76% of all coral species in the world in the Coral Triangle region, and home to more than 3,000 species of reef fish, and providing alternative income and food security for an estimated 130 million people. But the threats, of course, are numerous, including impact of destructive fishing, overfishing, plastic pollution, as well as climate change. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. The global biodiversity loss was recorded in a report from the WWF in 2014. and marine species declined by 49%. And we listed here a few status of species populations, including fish, sharks and rays, marine turtles, and the deep sea fish. And you see the cumulative decline of 49%, which almost 50% of marine populations have declined since 1970. So this is an alarming report, and we really hope that with this webinar, we can again share the great work that women leaders in this context are doing to address these issues. Next, please. So there's a global initiative underway called Protecting 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. And most of the countries in the Coral Triangle are supporting this initiative, also building on the IG targets from 2010. But it's very important to realize that more than 70% of the planet is covered by oceans, but only 2% of the oceans are really effectively managed against strongly destructive activities and extractive use throughout the region, but also worldwide. Next, please. So the Coral Triangle Center was established in 2010, and this was really based on the notion that all 6 countries recognize that capacity building is one of the key priorities to achieve our goals in protecting the marine biodiversity in this region. Next, please. So what we do is we provide practical training to local governments, to local communities. We particularly focus on women leaders as well. And we partner with local communities for effective management on the ground. And more, we also engage young children, elementary and high school, in specific marine conservation activities. Next, please. To date, we've trained more than 5,800 participants in the Coral Triangle, foremost raising the awareness and the tools on marine protected area management and planning as well. We have 26 practical training modules, which also include, for example, monitoring coral reefs or engaging local communities in the planning of your management plan. Next, please. To date, we support 387,000 hectares of marine protected areas throughout the Coral Triangle. Our 5 sites in Indonesia include Nusa Penida and 4 sites in the Moluccas and 2 sites in Timor-Leste, including Atauro and Likisa. Next, please. We supported the establishment of the Coral Triangle Initiative Women Leaders Forum in 2014 until now. And this was a great peer learning network for women who are playing key leadership roles in sustaining the marine resources of the Coral Triangle. And it has been proven a great platform to recognize women across the region for their work in marine resources management, but also maximize sharing and learning among the women leaders. And to date, we have more than 200 women leaders joining this forum, and they're also connected to women leaders networks in their respective countries. Next, please. One of the key activities was the intergenerational leadership learning program that we provided for 6 teams in the region. And the teams, each country were tasked with a marine challenge. And in the process, they also received leadership training. And we connected senior government officials or senior NGOs with junior members. And they did a great job in implementing those challenges. For example, in Timor-Leste, the women leaders set up a recycling project on Atauro. And with their small grant, they received institutional support to replicate this project elsewhere in Timor-Leste as well. Next, please. And empowering women in Indonesia, we focus a lot on the women in the blue swimming crab fisheries, empowering women in seaweed processors in Nusa Penida, marine protected area, and building women-led sustainable seafood business in Merauke in Papua. Next, please. And this is just an example how we empower the voice of the women and the blue swimming crab fisheries through Photo Voice International partner, and they actually helped make or visualize the issues in their villages, and provided an exhibition, engaged the local government in highlighting those issues. And at the moment, they have a great momentum and getting attention and actually budget allocation to address some of their issues related to the fisheries and in their village. Next, please. So this was just an example, an introduction of the Coral Triangle, an example of our work on fisheries and women leaders. And we look forward to hear from the other speakers today. And I'm very happy to introduce to you from the Nature Conservancy, Dr. Elizabeth McLeod, who is the Nature Conservancy's Global Reef Systems Lead. In this capacity, she provides strategic leadership of the Global Reef Team to implement priority science, policy, management strategies, communication, and fundraising efforts to elevate and scale up TNC's coral and shellfish reefs around the world. Elise is passionate about building local leadership to achieve global impact. And she has spent over 2 decades developing and implementing strategies to reduce the impacts of climate change on marine ecosystems and coastal communities, and has led the development of tools to improve reef management. She was instrumental in designing TNC's Reef Resilience Toolkit and trainings, which have trained over 35,000 reef managers in over 83% of the world's coral reef nations on the best practices for addressing threats to coral reefs. So welcome, Lizzie, to our webinar, and we look forward to learn more about the gender equality and social inclusion strategy from TNC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, really. So I just, on behalf of the Nature Conservancy, I want to thank all of you for joining today. I'm Dr. Lizzie McLeod, and I am absolutely passionate about both conservation and the importance of elevating and supporting women leaders around the world. So I'm really excited to be with you. I also wanted to thank my co-conveners from CTI-CFF Secretariat and Mary Kay, and all of the really phenomenal women leaders that you're going to be hearing from shortly. So we've been having this conversation. We are having this because women still face persistent barriers in marine conservation and globally. There's some estimates suggest that women in Asia are 70% less likely than men to be in the labor force, but there are major differences between countries ranging from 3 to 80%. The Nature Conservancy partnered with GIZ to commission a report on gender and barriers to gender equity in the Coral Triangle, and shared data such as in the Philippines, they ranked 14th in the world in economic participation, according to the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Index, while Timor-Leste ranked 135th. So major variations across the Coral Triangle countries. The Philippines also ranked the highest of CT countries for political empowerment of women, while Papua New Guinea ranked at the lowest. So again, there's just a tremendous amount of variability across the countries, both globally, but also in the Coral Triangle. Gender equality is a major challenge in marine conservation, and the global conservation community has been dominated historically by white men. The Nature Conservancy, where I work, is one of the world's largest conservation organizations in the world. I'm proud to share that we have some phenomenal women leaders in the Asia Pacific region. They have worked hard to support women's exchanges. They've partnered with CTC and others to support women's leadership and learning opportunities. They've hired staff whose primary role is to ensure that gender is mainstreamed into our conservation work. And in 2021, they codified a commitment to ensure that equity and inclusion are central to both our conservation work and our own workplace as well. So we are making a lot of progress, but we still have a lot of work to do. There was a recent analysis of the peer-reviewed literature that the Nature Conservancy scientists have put out, and they found that the peer-reviewed papers were dominated largely by men from the global north, reflecting broader global trends. The assessment of published papers over the last 50 years by TNC scientists found that only 31% were led by women as first authors, and the proportion of women from the global south was less than 3%. Over the last couple of years, we've hired our first female CEO, Jen Morris, which has been a phenomenal benefit to our organization. We've also hired our first female chief scientist, and both of these are incredible women, but they are both women from the United States and they are both white women. Representation is absolutely critical, especially for Indigenous women and women of color. And we have to work harder and faster to ensure that they also have a seat at the table. We are facing a global biodiversity and climate crisis, as we all know, and we need diverse and scalable solutions that reflect the values, needs, and solutions of everyone around the world. So that's why we're here, to talk about how we can make that happen together. So as we kick off today, I wanted to start by just sharing two key definitions. The first is gender equality, and the second is social inclusion. Gender equality refers to equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities for women, men, girls, boys, and non-binary peoples. Gender equality implies that the interests, needs, and priorities of different genders are taken into consideration, recognizing the differences in the diversity among groups. It is a fundamental human right, and it is also a key indicator of sustainable development. Next slide, please. Social inclusion is the process of improving terms of participation in society, particularly for marginalized groups and those that are disadvantaged. It can impact people in different ways and to different degrees, and it can change over time. And it influences people's abilities, their opportunities, and their human dignity. And when we enhance opportunities for people, support their access to resources, and respect rights, we are working to achieve social inclusion. So how can we support gender equality and social inclusion in marine conservation? There's been some recent research that identified some key ways of doing so. Next slide, please. The first is respect for diverse peoples and perspectives. This includes respect for both formal and customary rights, consideration of diverse institutions, practices, and knowledge systems, diverse worldviews, including marginalized groups. It also includes the affirmation of sovereignty, autonomy, and the right to self-determination, including the protection of both human and Indigenous rights. Next slide, please. Another key consideration is ensuring that conservation actions are effective. Conservation actions need to deliver real results for people, because when communities can see those results, they're more likely to support and participate in the conservation efforts. Next, please. In addition to being effective, we also have to make sure that marine conservation produces benefits for communities that are equitably distributed. And we have to understand and reduce the adverse impacts of conservation as we seek to maximize the benefits. And for those who live in or around marine conservation areas, they can be impacted in positive or negative ways. And we need to make sure that they have an active role in the planning and management of those areas, and that they're able to voice their perspectives and concerns and provide consent prior to implementation. Next slide, please. Another key element is supporting participation in decision-making and good governance. Inclusive and participatory decision-making with representation from diverse groups, use of free, prior, and informed consent, and ensuring that local organizations and communities can attend, prepare for, and fully participate in meetings and play an active role in management. I just wanted to share a quick aside here. 20 years ago, when I started my coral reef work, I actually did my master's in Raja Ampat, and I was studying SASI, the traditional marine management. And I was trying to interview both men and women in the communities to better understand how they were traditionally managing their resources. And I faced two critical challenges trying to interview the women. One, they didn't have time. It was very difficult to find time to sit down and chat with the women because they were cooking, cleaning, fishing, taking care of the kids, and they simply lacked time to sit and answer survey questions. And secondly, when I did find opportunities to meet with them, they were often multitasking, cooking, or bouncing babies on their laps. And I learned that sometimes when the younger women were in the groups with the older women, the younger women weren't free to share their opinions, or they wouldn't share their opinions in front of the women. And then often when I'd be interviewing a small group of women, some of the men would come over and join the group, and then they would be giving the survey responses. And it was very difficult to actually get information from this group of women. What came out of this for me at a very early age in my career was just the importance of understanding that active participation takes a critical understanding of local context, local values, and the realities. And it takes a lot of time. And I think, for many of those who are here working with communities or who are leading conservation efforts, we can all appreciate the importance of taking the time so that we can make sure that we have true and full engagement. Next slide, please. Another key element of supporting gender equality is championing and supporting local leaders. This is a photograph of some women from a local women's group in the Solomon Islands called Kauai, and you're actually going to be hearing more about that in a few minutes later today. These women are working together to protect sea turtles, they're leading ecotourism projects, and they're educating young girls who are learning conservation and education sciences more broadly. It's a phenomenal group that the Nature Conservancy has been working closely with. Next slide, please. Another key important piece of supporting gender equity is leading women-only women's learning exchanges. This was an exchange that I led a few years ago in the Pacific, and it was women were brought together from across the region to talk about how they were being affected by climate change. And I've been studying and working in climate change for a decade, and I thought I knew the impacts were sea level rise and changes in water temperature and more. But for the first time, I heard stories of how women were subject to violence following storms, or how young girls were subject to violence when they'd have to walk farther to get water from a neighboring village during times of drought. It completely changed the way I understood climate impacts and the way I approach supporting solutions. So these exchanges are absolutely vital to give women an opportunity to share their impacts, their stories, their perspectives, and their solutions so that we can make sure that they're truly reflective of the needs of everyone. Next slide, please. And finally, educating the next generation. This is absolutely mission critical. This is extremely important to the work we do at the Nature Conservancy and many of the partners who are speaking today. And I actually just recently read the Coral Triangle Center had launched a new Ocean Keeper Club, which I love this. I've got young kids of my own. And this is a virtual club for kids 7 to 11 so that they can learn about the ocean and the challenges that it's facing, and then they can become agents of change. So these are all important ways that we can support engagement and support gender equality. So next slide, please. So how do we meet the challenge? We can be catalysts of change for building gender equity, and we can do so by promoting new approaches to conservation. We can contribute to local women's networks. We can support women leaders like the phenomenal women that you're going to be hearing from shortly. We can encourage governments to develop policies that elevate opportunities for women and advocate at international fora for more voices from inspiring women leaders from all around the world. With recent calls for 30% of the world's oceans, lands, and waters to be protected, we have to ensure that we move beyond metrics of simply area protected to include the critical need for effective and equitable management of the marine environment. Gender equity must be a core principle of all of our conservation policies and organizational practices, as it can help to prompt conservation initiatives that are inclusive, that are collaborative, that are fair and robust, and that ultimately will be more effective and sustainable in the long term. Thank you so much. And now we'll be turning it over to hear a video from Virginie Najen Malek from Mary Kay.
Thank you so much, Lizzie, for your excellent presentation and hearing about the commitment of the Nature Conservancy to the gender equality and social inclusion approach in all what we do, and especially also the definitions related to gender equality and social inclusion were very strong. And I think this is a great introduction to all of the speakers that we have today. So thank you so much. And as Lizzie said, the next presentation is a video delivered by Virginie Najen Malek from Mary Kay, explaining the commitment of this very innovative company to gender equality and ocean conservation. And Virginie is the global head, sustainability and social impact at Mary Kay's global headquarters in Dallas, Texas, USA. She leads the Women's Empowerment and Equality, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, Global Advocacy, Cause Marketing and Community Investment. She also contributes to shaping the global grant giving strategy for the Mary Kay Ash Foundation, whose twofold mission is to help find cures for cancers affecting women and to eradicate domestic and gender-based violence. Since 2019, Virginie has committed to advancing the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator by collaborating with 6 UN agency partners and several advocacy partners such as We Empower, UN SDG Challenge, and Commonwealth Business Women Network. So let us look at Virginie's video. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Virginie Naijan-Malek, Global Head of Sustainability and Social Impact for Mary Kay Inc. I'm thrilled to participate in this event in collaboration with the Coral Triangle Center, the Nature Conservancy, and the CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat. Mary Kay was founded in 1963 with one goal: enriching women's lives. Our focus on conservation and sustainability is a foundational value. Our founder, Mary Kay Ash, once said, "I feel very strongly that we must do everything in our power to save our planet." Mary Kay has environmental commitments because we strongly feel it is the right thing to do. We believe preserving our planet is the only way forward to ensure a sustainable future. Mary Kay's global sustainability strategy, Enriching Lives Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, offers a holistic approach that encompasses the three dimensions of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social, through 5 pillars activated by 15 commitments to deliver a decade of sustainable action. A key component of tackling climate change and achieving the SDGs is ocean action. The ocean covers 70% of the Earth. It is the planet's largest biosphere and is home to up to 80% of all life in the world. As you all know, the Coral Triangle is the international heart of coral reefs and the lifeline of our ocean. The world's coral reefs have reached a crisis point. In the last 3 decades, we have lost more than a half of the world's corals, and scientists estimate that if we continue with business as usual, 90% of coral reefs could be gone. Mary Kay understands any threat to the health of our ocean is an existential threat to us all, and we are committed to working with other leaders in this space to make a difference. TNC has created impactful conservation initiatives that elevate women-led programs in the Coral Triangle and across the globe. We know that we cannot compartmentalize sustainable development as only an environmental issue. Mary Kay is committed to being a good steward of our natural resources, while fostering gender equality and women's empowerment in conservation. Let's consider a few facts from the Asia-Pacific region. On average, women in Asia are 70% less likely than men to be in the labor force, but there is significant variance between individual countries. For example, in the Coral Triangle region, the Philippines is ranked 14th in the world in economic participation, according to the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index, while Timor-Leste ranks 135 on the same scale. Even though some progress has been made on a global scale, with an increase in the appointment of women political leaders, the East Asia and Pacific region has seen an overall regression in the gender gap for political participation, which indicates a decline in the political participation of women in recent years. Of the 6 Coral Triangle countries, the Philippines ranks the highest at 29 on the Gender Gap Index, and Papua New Guinea ranks the lowest at 152 in political empowerment for women. If the countries of Asia-Pacific reduce the gender gap in the labor force by 25%, this could add an additional 3.2 trillion in cumulative GDP, a figure roughly equivalent to India's annual GDP. Due to these projected economic benefits, bringing women into the workforce has been a key strategy for many growing economies in the regions. Many of the projects we support achieve conservation success and gender equality and economic empowerment around the globe. Key projects that support women leaders in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands include partnering with TNC and the women of Mangrove Market Mary. Mangrove Market Mary is a group that markets sustainable mangrove products such as shellfish and mud crabs while protecting mangroves for being harvested for their wood. With our support, they will receive training in leadership, financial literacy, and business management to generate much-needed income and employment opportunities. This project will benefit the mangrove ecosystem by launching a mangrove ecotourism venture and by conducting an analysis of blue carbon opportunities that will create incentives for mangrove protection and restoration. We have also supported TNC's work with Kawaki in the Solomon Islands to protect sea turtles and conduct conservation education and community health program in the Arnavan Community Marine Park. Their conservation education and sanitation programs have reached 2,000 people in schools and local communities. In 2021, they also conducted gender training with 30 park rangers, Kawaki members, and other community stakeholders to understand and challenge gender-based norms that may inhibit women's involvement in the park. Our continued support of Kawaki will also help them set the stage for establishing the park as an important tourism destination that delivers financial benefits to local communities by providing training in finance, workplace safety, and marine safety, to name a few. Our support of ocean work reflects the legacy of action Mary Kay has been building for nearly 60 years. Mary Kay celebrates the work we and others on this panel have done to invest in our planet and protect our oceans, a resource which sustains the livelihood of about 3 billion people worldwide. Through strategic local community-based conservation, we as a global community can safeguard the planet's remaining coral reefs and work toward a healthy, thriving ocean for generations to come. Thank you.
Well, very impressive video from Mary Kay, delivered by Virginie. And it's very clear that the commitment of Mary Kay to support gender equality, social inclusion around the globe is very eminent. And we like to thank Mary Kay Corporate for their support to the women leaders across the region and globally, as well as to this webinar. So thank you so much. So we now like to introduce speakers from the field. The first one is Madeline Ehrlich from the Solomon Islands, and she will talk about female rangers saving leatherback turtles in the Solomon Islands. She is a conservation practitioner at the Nature Conservancy field office in the Solomon Islands and has been with TNC for 4 years. Madeline is leading the gender work to implement gender-sensitive and inclusive programs in the Solomon Islands. Currently, she's working with 4 different women groups across Solomon Islands who are participating in conserving their resources. Thank you, Madeline. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, really. And hi, everyone. I am happy to be here. And I'll be sharing stories with you all about the equity and the inclusive effort on conservation we are trying to do here at the Solomon Islands. And I will be sharing it on the project level as a person that interacts with the women in the field. And the topic I will be sharing today is on the women ranges, but I thought I will begin by making mention of the Kawaki. I think you have heard this from Elizabeth and also from Virginia's video. This is where the equity work in Solomon sort of started, and it is an inspiration leading to the formation of the women ranges in the leatherback turtle conservation. Next slide, please. So just before going into the details, I just want to share just with you where exactly we're working. So TNC works in the Isabel province and the Choiseul province. And these two provinces, you can see in the map, are linked to Annobon Islands, and Annobon is in the red square there. You can see the yellow beaches there. That is where we work with the leatherback, the endangered Western Pacific leatherback turtle nesting beaches. In the Annobon is the hawksbill turtle. So basically that is where the work TNC is doing, and it's currently located in Solomon Islands. This place is right in the community, so very much subsistent living experience there. Next slide. So Solomon Island is a very strong perennial society. So when the conservation work comes in, it comes into the system that is already and comfortably practiced there. And so we see mostly the conservation work is an all-men zone, from leading to managing and also involving as rangers. It has been like this for some time. This has never been questioned or challenged. And so for over 2 decades, it was all male dominated. There were 3 different communities with 3 different cultures that surrounds Annobon, and there was a need to have an equal representation of these communities. However, not so much the gender part. Not until the mid-2010, there was an ask to have women to be represented in the management board. But we see that it was quite difficult to get the women into a system that has already been running for some time. Yeah, so there are challenges when it comes to that. And so in 2016, these women from the Katopika, Wagina, and Kia, the 3 communities that look after the Annobon, they approached TNC and they decided to form a separate group. They want to operate separately, but as partners to the Annobon Islands. So TNC facilitated the formation and supported them by creating these educational programs. Next slide, please. So it is about biodiversity of the Solomons, what is unique about Solomon Islands, how they're going to look after it, what are the threats to the biodiversity that they have around them. So as you can see the photos, that is the Kawaki women going out to the communities to do the awareness. And they have been advocates for Annobon since they've started in 2017. They've covered over 15 communities already, and they've gone into schools, their communities, their households. And it is phenomenal how these women have grown just from 5 members in 2017. Now there are 400 members in the communities, and each one are doing their own advocacy in their own households and in their communities, as well. Next slide. And so one of the many things that have been different and made better because of Kawaki in the Annobons, one of them is the ability to build this relationship, building the link between the Annobon, which is the protected area, back to the 3 communities that look after it. And also influencing the next generation as well. They've reached to many children in the schools and in the communities. As you can see in the picture, the children just loved these colored pictures. These women also take inspiration from what is happening in Annobons, and when they go back to the communities, they start to do involving initiatives that are trying to protect their coral reefs. They are going into waste management practices, trying to put away plastics, teaching the children not to throw plastics and all that. They're also involved in advocating against the logging and mining, which people are interested to do, like would affect their areas. And then they also came up with this idea for ecotourism and education venture in the Annobons. that would provide an avenue for the children to come over to Annawan and learn of how to protect the turtles, how important it is to protect the turtles. And so from since this group formed as a separate group, it was much easier and faster for them to carry out the objectives. Some of these projects they are doing, they have to work alongside the management body. And that is where the challenge is. But then we have to, they have to build the respect and the relationship in order for them to work together. So Kawaki has been working closely with the Annawan board to really support for cooperation into the future venture of the Annawans. Next slide. And like I said today, there is also another work that is ongoing, which is focused on the leatherback. The leatherback is a critically endangered species, especially the western one, which comes to nests in the Solomons. With the expansion of the leatherback to one of the new sites in Isabel, the area is owned by Annette Ofu. This is one of the women leaders in the tribal group. And I think these women were inspired by what Kawaki is doing and has done. And so they wanted to be involved as well in the leatherback. And one of their goals was for women to become rangers, to walk in the beach, to monitor these leatherback turtles. This is something which hasn't happened in Annawans yet. And so because of that, the team decided to start right at the beginning of the process. From the lessons learned from Kawaki and Annawans, the team decided to provide this avenue for conversations where men and women in the tribe, they come together and then they hear themselves out. And to have that, to have both male and female, men and women in one room, we must be specific in giving out the invitations so that all of them because we find that if the invitations are general, we will find all male will attend. So yeah, next slide. And to give a context for the conversation, we have to run gender trainings. Basic gender trainings in all the interactions that we have with the communities, either be the consultation part or the science training, the monitoring training, all of that we have to put in the gender training, and then prompting questions for them to discuss why women can or cannot be rangers, for example. And we find that in the beginning of the sessions, it's quite rigid. We had to separate them into different groups so that they can talk freely, and then we get them together and then they talk to each other. We find that it was useful. It was healthy as well, given we have ground rules for respect and also done it in a fun way. One of the strengths we find is to have male champion in these discussions. And so we invited members of the tribal group that are retired public servants. They've already been working with the government for some years. They're now retired and they're prominent leaders in their tribe. And so we get them in these discussions. They're supported when the women come forward to say that they want to be rangers. These men supported this notion. Yeah. And so this is one of the things we find is very useful in these discussions. We had to make sure that there's the conversations are between the men and the women. They have all the time to have these conversations between them, as you can see in the picture here. Next slide. And so like at the end of these consultations and the trainings, there's a general acceptance that women can also be part of the rangers. And so in November 2021, 5 women joined the rangers training, theory and practical. And as part of the practical, we gave the women the opportunity to experience what it is like, get the feel of the work currently done as rangers. Yeah, I remember that night when we were doing the training, and then the supervisor was saying, okay, we'll have the men go out at night because the beach is very long and it will be quite dangerous for the women. In the evening, the women sneaked out first and went to the beach and stayed there till 3 o'clock. And that had sort of changed the whole thing. By December last year, for the first time since the conservation work for turtle established in Solomon Islands, 3 women started working as female rangers at this nesting site called Sasakola. And from hearing these stories, the other 2 sites that have been looking after the leatherback, they decided to also have women in the team. So we trained another 13 young women in August. So now we have 17 women trained so far in monitoring turtles. Next slide, please. And they are actively, 3 of them actively working at Sasakola and Susoilo, and 2 others will begin to join in rotations in the site in Haibo. These are the women rangers that were trained in August 2022. There are challenges we are aware of that were raised during the conversations related to cultural sensitivity, the safety and security for the women, the families. We find out that inclusive conservation component comes with its needs. It's costly as well. And currently we are trying to address some of this by building a separate rangers house for the women. And by doing this, we start looking at addressing some of the challenges that they raise, and also start looking at working at the procedures, monitoring procedures that will be conducive for the women to work. For the team, this is very early at its stage. It's just 9 months since it started. We had to ensure that communications are open. We have to listen to the communities, respect their views, and also start to address through these challenges that might arise. And finally, I have to say that the steady support from the team, the TNC team, the organization as a whole, and then there's a person to be there when we maneuver these changes. I think the support from the team and the staff also speaks well of the progress of this work. And so, yeah, it is an exciting chapter for the Solomon Islands program. Women are now taking the lead and be part of conservation work, and also women involving us rangers here. Yeah, to be part of that it is a very big U10 for the Solomon Islands program. I think that's all I have to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for your inspiring presentation, and to learn more about the Kawaki women in the Arnavon Islands and how they actually inspired not only their own community, but other communities as well in Isabel, and inspiring the women there to become turtle rangers. And I think one lesson learned I picked up very well in your story is the need also to engage the men who are community leaders and have them support these programs for the women as well throughout the Solomon Islands. So thank you so much, Madeline, for this wonderful presentation. Very much appreciated. Our next speaker is from the Philippines, Irina Molina. She will talk about citizen science for dugong conservation in the Philippines. Irina is an environmental scientist and a marine conservationist. Prior to taking up her master's in environmental science at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She was a conservation research specialist for Haribon Foundation, an environmental NGO in the Philippines, working on biodiversity conservation, where she was involved in a project that aimed to use fishes knowledge to help identify locally extinct reef fish species in the Philippines. In 2018, she co-produced a virtual reality film entitled Grandpa's Reef that provides an immersive experience to its viewers about the underwater world and aims to bring students to our coral reefs from the comfort of their classrooms. She also received a National Geographic grant to study the spatial distribution, habitat use patterns, and risk of dugongs in Calawit Island, Busuanga, Philippines, which involved the indigenous people of Calawit Islands by employing the citizen science approach to conservation. So, Irina, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, really, for that kind introduction. Again, good morning, everyone. I am Irina Molina, and it's my honor to be here with you today with other inspiring women in conservation and share with you my experience as a marine conservationist in the Philippines and how I ended up knowing Aban, the name of this dugong you can see in this picture, who resides in Calawit Island, Busuanga in Palawan, Philippines, and also share with you some of the efforts that are being done towards dugong conservation in partnership with C3 Philippines, which is a grassroots NGO in Palawan focused on community-centered conservation. But first, I'd like to take you to the very beginning of my journey as a marine conservationist. So growing up, when I was a child, I grew up in the northern part of the Philippines. I really loved going to the beach, playing in the sand with my friends. And then fast forward to when I was 15 years old, I had my first snorkeling experience in Batangas, which is one of the famous diving hotspots here in the Philippines. And it was the very first time that I was that I encountered the ocean in a different way. I saw lots of fish. I was really amazed by what I discovered because in the north where I grew up, we really didn't have this richness in terms of like I saw different kinds of fish species, and it was the first time that I got to appreciate the beauty of our marine ecosystem, and that fueled my desire to work towards its protection. And of course, little did I know during that time that the Philippines, we have a rich marine ecosystem, home to thousands of fish species, hundreds of coral species, and numerous marine mammals that roam our waters. And of course, the Philippines is part of the Coral Triangle. And more than 63 million people rely on this marine resource as a source of food and livelihood. But unfortunately, this rich ecosystem is already under threat because of illegal fishing, overexploitation, and habitat degradation. And then 5 years later, I found myself spending time with these fishers in 5 different marine areas in the Philippines. I lived in coastal villages while trying to understand their fishing situation through one-on-one interviews, and in search for fish species that disappeared from their catches since they started fishing. And it was also the time when I realized that women are really like intertwined with the work of our fishers here in our country, because like as a family, as husband and wife, they are also involved in the process of fishing. So in this process, when I was working with fishers, interviewing them, looking for answers whether how much fishing has changed throughout the years, and what are the fish species that disappeared from their catches. I showed them fish books, and they were enjoying browsing the fish book and while identifying marine species that they were able to catch throughout the years. I also joined fishing trips. I joined the spear fishers as they went spear fishing underwater. I joined this hook and line fisher. We circled an island 3 times until this happened. So we were only able to catch a single fish in an hour's worth of fishing. And then that moment in time, I realized how hard it is to catch fish nowadays. And then I joined this gillnet fishers, and we were talking about how much their fish catch have changed throughout the years, and we were waiting for them to reel the net that they put underwater. And then I also experienced joining these fishers at night. It was around like 7 p.m. and we were in the middle of the sea trying to catch some fish that we will have for dinner. And then after all these experiences with them, I was able to gather this fishers, representatives from community villages, and also women working in this field. And I gathered them in a meeting, relaying them what I've found through the interviews, that indeed their catches are dwindling according to the interviews, and they could be losing more than 20 fish species in their waters. And it was a good way for them to understand that they need to work together and be responsible fishers so the community could benefit it more from their marine resources. So indeed, like in the process, I learned that conservation actions are needed to be done in engaging local communities, and of course also involving women and having them participate in the discussions in developing management solutions, because this is a good strategy in ensuring the sustainability of our marine resources. And in that meeting, one statement of a fisher actually struck me. He said that in the past, we can still see the fish in front of us. Today, we can only see it in pictures. This experiences really made me realize how important it is to work with our fishers and how community engagement and environmental education are key drivers to the success of our conservation efforts. And I realized that fishers are experts of our ocean. More often than not, they know more about the ocean than I do. They're more knowledgeable about what's happening in the ocean. And I believe that they are our first ocean protectors. So fueled by these experiences, I became interested to study dugongs because of their close link with the coastal community. So as you all know, dugongs graze on seagrass beds, which are most of the time located close to shore. And since dugongs spend most of their time grazing on seagrass beds, it is likely that their lives, as shown in this video, are inherently intertwined with our fishers who travel by boat, who are fishing at sea. And you can really see in these pictures that the dugong's life is how the dugong's life is intertwined with our coastal communities. So in partnership with C3 Philippines, I was involved in a project on the conservation and protection of this marine mammal using the citizen science framework. We've conducted trainings in the local community, in dugong biology, ecology, and also trainings on how to collect data for our dugong monitoring program. And in the end, we've trained more than 60 community members. We've also invited women from the island. These are indigenous peoples called the Tagbanwa. And indeed, they are not just becoming dugong protectors in the process, but also responsible fishers. So this is the island that where we worked. So it's located in Palawan, Philippines. And what we did was a simultaneous land-based dugong monitoring scheme. And with the help of more than 60 citizen scientists, we had more than 30 stations around the island. And then each station would have 2 citizen scientists each. monitoring dugongs from sunrise to sunset. And these are some of the photos that were taken during the field in 2019. And as you can see here, we've provided binoculars, we've provided like data sheets where they will enter their dugong sightings within the day. And of course, we've also invited women also to be part of this effort. So in this photo, I am with Jane, one of the Tagbanwa women who joined us in our monitoring program. There's only a few, but I think it's a work in progress. It's nice to at least to invite them and let them know that they can also be part of our conservation efforts. So I'm with Jane here on this photo because the monitoring program is somewhat a strenuous activity because we were on top of this tree in our assigned monitoring station, and we were there from sunrise to sunset, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., just looking out whether we see dugongs in our station. And we are doing this simultaneously for 3 consecutive days with 62 other community members who are trained citizen scientists around the island. And just to give you an idea, this is how a dugong could appear in our station. And I really believe that when these community members experience this kind of effort and be part of conservation efforts, I believe that through citizen science, when we engage community members to take part in conservation, they are appreciating the species more, and therefore they are more inspired to protect it. And then this video was taken from the field, and I took this video of a mother and calf in Calawit Island, and it was really a humbling experience to be in that moment. And I realized that this calf could symbolize hope, not just for the dugongs of Calawit Island, but also hope for dugongs in the Philippines, considering that its status is critically endangered. Yeah, so before I end, I will also take time to share that through the years, I have also come to realize the power of raising awareness. I believe that we need to continuously inspire the youth to value our planet in order for them to take action. And in 2019, I had this opportunity to talk about dugongs to a kindergarten class in the US. And at the end of that exchange, they ended up adopting a dugong through WWF's Adopt a Dugong program. And then in 2019, we also released this. We produced this virtual reality film. It's called Grandpa's Reef, that aims to showcase the beauty of our coral reefs. And we shot this as Apo Reef Natural Park off the coast of Occidental Mindoro in the Philippines, which is known as the second largest contiguous coral reef in the world, next to Bataha. And the film, Grandpa's Reef, it follows the story of a young girl who wants to help protect the endangered coral reef of her grandfather. And me, together with the other explorers who are part of producing this film, we believe we produced this film because we believe that the more people see the wildlife and what a reef looks like and how beautiful it is, the more one is inspired to protect it. And with funding, we were able to share this film to 5 different schools in the same area within the municipality with the same jurisdiction as Apo Reef. And it was very fulfilling to watch how these kids reacted to the film, because after watching the film, they told us that they felt they were swimming, they felt that they were there, and were surprised to know that it was actually part of their home. So if you're interested, you can also watch the film. It's already available at National Geographic's YouTube channel, and feel free to share it also to your respective networks. Ultimately, I really believe that it is really important to give our youth a space for learning these amazing creatures like the dugong, and be acquainted with the beauty of our coral reefs, since no one is ever too young to take part in conservation efforts. So ultimately, citizen science and environmental education are key drivers to our conservation efforts. I think that's about it, and that's what I wanted to share. Thank you everyone for the invitation and for the opportunity to share, and also to empower that women can be also part of the field of marine conservation. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Irina, for your inspiring story and your personal story, how you encountered the oceans in a different way, and how you took us through your journey in engaging with fishermen and your experiences in Palawan, protecting the dugong habitat, engaging also citizens, as well as your education programs for children. And I think there's so many lessons learned in your story that we are very honored that you were happy to share that with us today. So thank you so much, Irina, for your
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you. So I'm also happy to introduce the next speaker to our webinar from Indonesia. Her name is Dr. L. Wibisono. She will be talking about promoting sustainable fisheries through art and science. Elle is a Louis Walton Fellow at Conservation International, working as the Senior Manager for Fisheries and Marine Protected Areas. She's responsible for developing and designing the science pillar of the Blue Halo S initiative, an integrated protection and production mechanism for 100% sustainably managed ocean. Prior to this, she was a Knaus Marine Policy Fellow at the US Senate, where she helped draft, research, communicate, and negotiate oceans and climate change bills, such as the Coral Reef Restoration Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. She also worked at the Nature Conservancy Indonesia Fisheries Conservation Project on the sustainable management of deep water snapper and grouper fisheries. In addition to her research and policy work, Elle explores the importance of effective science communication by designing and creating fish comics. And through her comics, she aims to highlight topics in fishery science and conservation in a fun and engaging way. She received a bachelor's degree in biological science from Wellesley College and a PhD in sustainable fisheries management from the University of Rhode Island. So let us enjoy the presentation from Dr. L. Wibisono. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. Allow me to share my screen to start the presentation. Does everybody see my full screen for the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I am so honored to be here in such a wonderful panel, sharing a little bit about my experience promoting sustainable fisheries through art and science. My name is Elle Wibisono, and I'm a fishery scientist by trade. But for today, I'll be focusing on the art side that I do on the side. Currently, I do work for Conservation International, but right now, I am talking as a comic illustrator, a fish comic illustrator. I think the first question is why fisheries? And there really is two main reasons why I decided to focus on fisheries. The first is because a fishery is definitely the main cause of marine biodiversity reduction. And also, the second reason is that most people's interface with the ocean is not through scuba diving, it's not through going to the beach. And a matter of fact, accessing the ocean is definitely a huge issue to a lot of people who live inland. But a lot of people do eat seafood, especially in Indonesia. So I'm hoping that by engaging people through the fishery side, through helping people choose what they eat, when they decide to consume seafood, we can really make an impact on the marine ecosystem. And when I do my research in fisheries, especially when I'm doing my dissertation, I keep on hearing two questions or two comments over and over again. And the first one is that my friends and my family would keep on asking me, so what is it really that you do? And this is not a question that's asked once or twice, but it's every single time I meet them. And then the second comment that I sometimes get is, when I tell people that I'm a fishery scientist, other people would correct me and say, "Oh, you mean a marine biologist?" No, 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 like a fishery scientist. Yeah, you mean a marine biologist. And after all of these questions and comments, I realized that the way I'm communicating what I'm doing or what my role is in marine conservation is not effective. And we need to find better ways to really communicate what fisheries science is and why fisheries is important and how people can be more engaged in the realm of fishery science and how it impacts their lives. So especially in fisheries, I think there's a unique opportunity to explore those communication methods, because even though the data that we collect in fisheries is, a lot of them has to do with fish, like the fish species and the fish length, but when we're talking about the actual implementation of fishery management, it's really about managing people and not managing the fish. And when we're trying to manage human beings or other people, it gets really messy. It's complicated. It's confusing. Sometimes it's just downright frustrating. But there we really need stories. We need to know how we can touch people. We need to learn how to listen to people. How do we share to them what our thoughts are? How do we get to change people's minds? And there I feel like the power of storytelling becomes really, really important. And so I grew up reading a lot of comics. This might not be true to everybody's growing up experience, but through the comics that I read when I was a child, I learned so many things about the world, everything from friendship and courage and never giving up. And basically, I grew up on comics, and a lot of lessons I took from it. And so I tried to use my personal experience, and maybe I can also impart lessons to other people through these comics. And so here I am embarking on a side project trying to convey fishery science and marine conservation through these fish comics. And the idea is to capture the science and also the nuance, because especially in fisheries, there's so much uncertainty. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into it, and improve the literacy of just the general public on what it means to be in marine conservation and what fishery science is. And hopefully we can influence how people think, and how people think would determine how people feel and ultimately impact how people will act. And so hopefully by this series of illustrations and comics, we can improve people's understanding, but also empower people to also become the next generation of fishery scientists. If you go through my comics, you might notice that every time that there's a scientist represented, it's always female scientists, because I think representation do matter. And I hope that when I was growing up that I could see something like that in the media. So I'll just go through some examples of the comics that I do. For the ABCs of fisheries, we're clearly going from the back here. This is Z for zooplankton. And all of the comics are in English and Indonesian for accessibility. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see some very stylized examples of zooplanktons that you might find in the ocean. And we explore some of the topics of zooplankton, like the vertical migration. And I remember when I made this this comic, I really tried to make it as cute and as beautiful as possible, because when we're communicating science to the public, we're not competing with other science content. We're competing with videos of cute puppies playing in the garden. We're competing with makeup gurus, like showing makeup tutorials online. And so to get that attention and to get people's just headspace to look at what we want to convey is very difficult. And so we gotta use every tools there is. And if it means making things extra cute or extra beautiful, I think it's worth doing. But not all of the topics that we explore in the alphabet of fisheries, for example, is light. For example, M is for mortality, because mortality is a really important topic in fishery science, and because it's quite a morbid topic. A lot of the imageries is about ghosts and fish zombies. And in fisheries, there are two types of mortality, really. There's natural mortality, where the fish dies because of natural causes like old age or disease. And then there is the fishing mortality, which is based on the fishing industry or people extracting from the water. And only the really nerdy people would really care about natural mortality and fishing mortality. Unless you have to calculate things, it might not impact other people. But let's try to explore the so what. Why is it important for the general public to understand these two types? And so we go into the concept of understanding total mortality and how that impacts the way fishery managers calculate how much fish is left in the ocean and how much fish is allowed to be caught by other people. But not only that, is that in calculating the mortality, there are a lot of uncertainties. I think sometimes there's some public perception that scientists knows the answer to everything, and everything that scientists say is absolutely certain, is 100% correct. But especially when we're estimating fish populations, there is so much uncertainties and there's so much that we don't know. And a lot of the reason or a lot of the ways that we can at least minimize the uncertainties through good data. And good data involves a lot of people. It involves the fishers collecting good data. It involves government officials collecting good data, enumerators collecting good data. So hopefully we'll start to convey the nuances about what fishery scientists do, but also the importance of why we do the things that we do and why we need everybody's participation. The letter V was probably the most complicated letter that I had to illustrate. I tried to find something that's a little bit simpler, but truly, I couldn't find anything else that starts with a V that was related to fisheries. So V was for von Bertalanffy feed growth function, and it's usually abbreviated to VBGF. This gets really nerdy really quick. But basically, this growth function equation, it's a way to approximately calculate the fish's length based on the age. So similar like humans, as the fish grows older, the fish grows longer, grows a little bit bigger until it hits a certain age, and then the growth rates becomes much slower. Just like humans, after our growth spurt, at some point we stop growing. But then we also explore what that means for fisheries management, what that means for other people. So from this growth function, we can know at what length the fish stops growing, basically. And so for anchovies, that length is pretty small because they max out when they're pretty tiny. And for tunas, they go pretty big. And so what does that mean for fisheries management? What does that mean for biomass? What does that mean for how much fish is allowed to be caught? And hopefully people can relate to fishery science a little bit better that way. And so what is next? There's several things that I would like to discuss a little bit on the what next part. The first is, here we can see that there's sometimes this myth that you need to be a marine biologist or you need to be a scientist when you work in marine conservation. Or if we're talking about science communication, that, oh, you need to be a designer or to be an artist. And really, I think the fact is we can contribute to science communication or marine conservation with whatever our uniqueness and our passion and skills and hobbies bring to the table. The take-home message from this little sharing is not that everybody should become illustrators or should make comics, but hey, like, if you like making music, if you like making reels, if you like to make short videos, definitely pursue that. And whatever skills that you have, I think there are ways to make an impact into the marine conservation work. I think one thing that sometimes slightly bothers me working in this field is that I always see the same people. Even if I move organizations, it's always the same group of people. We're just changing our t-shirts or we're changing our affiliations. And that makes us very siloed. And I think when we're talking about really expanding our reach and really touching people in different ways, we need to involve a whole lot of people so we can be more creative and we can learn a lot more in how we communicate to others. Keep it short and sweet. That's it from me. And hopefully we can be inspired to do different things when we communicate science and conservation to others. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Elle. A very original and inspiring way to talk about the science of fisheries management. And I think the way you actually approach it is so accessible for many people and makes it much more simple for them to understand, as you say, the very complex fisheries issues that we try to address. And it's really also the notion that everyone can contribute to fisheries management. As you say, you don't have to be a fisheries scientist or a marine biologist, but you can contribute in many other ways, through art, through design, and through your own approach to fisheries. So thank you so much, Elle, for sharing this very interesting and innovative way how to communicate about fisheries science and management to the larger public. Thank you. So the next speaker comes from Malaysia. Her name is Serena Adam, and she will talk about sharks and ray conservation in Malaysia. Sorry. Serena is the Shark Conservation Officer at WWF Malaysia since 2017. She's currently a member of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group. Her work focuses on project management, research coordination of bycatch mitigation initiatives, species monitoring in marine protected areas, as well as fulfilling important scientific gaps. Her goal is to improve the recovery of these vulnerable species and ensure they are still swimming in our waters for years to come. Serena is also part of the team that developed Reef Stakes, an award-winning educational role-playing game on the marine environment. Thank you, Serena, for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, really, for the introduction. Just checking if my speaker is working. Is everyone clear?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll be sharing my presentation shortly. Give me a minute. Oh. All right, just checking if everyone can see my presentation slide clearly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, really, and thank you for the opportunity for speaking with this wonderful panels of women leading in marine conservation. I was very inspired because we were all working in with different species, different group of species, but we could all relate to a very common approach when it comes to protecting biodiversity. So working with communities, making use of citizen science, and even looking at from an art and science perspective, I was really intrigued that these sort of approaches were used among protection of biodiversity. So I'll be presenting a little bit of our work in Malaysia in shark and ray conservation. This is a very much woman-led. I was very fortunate that a lot of the people that I work with in Malaysia are mostly women. We've been given a lot of opportunities here to pursue conservation. So I'll be sharing some of the experience that we have in Malaysia, as well as some issues with regards to sharks and rays. Okay, so just for a global perspective, what is the current status of sharks and rays? Currently, over 1/3 of the species are threatened by overfishing. The first global assessment was conducted in 2014. And just within less than 6 years, you could see that the numbers of species that are threatened with extinction has doubled. And collectively, that's about 37% of all species that are threatened with extinction. So this is actually a very serious, I would say, growth of extinction. And a lot of the extinction rate of species that are threatened are mostly occurred in the tropical and subtropical coastal species. So in the Coral Triangle region, we're included, and we're not an exception to it. And so this is very concerning for many of the species worldwide. The key threat for sharks and ray is mainly due to overfishing. In most countries, sharks and ray are caught as unintentionally. In other words, they are caught along with other commercially valuable species. In Malaysia, that is also the case. Most of the species are caught accidentally in commercial fisheries and as well as artisanal fisheries. But also at the same time, consumption and trade is driving the overfishing of the species. But apart from overfishing, it is worsened by habitat loss. Climate change has an impact of the species as well, and as well as pollution. So in Malaysia, we are home to a very rich diversity of species. As of 2016, we have recorded at least 70 sharks and 85 species of rays, and of which many of them are still threatened with extinction and has not received any legal protection in Malaysia. So some of the species that you see on my right, we still see them in our waters, the rhino rays, the hammerheads, the white-spotted wedgefish, the spotted eagle ray, and the pelagic treasure. You can still find them in Malaysia, but they have not yet received any legal protection, nor have they been able to mitigate some of these threats. So at WWF Malaysia, what we do for sharks and ray, I've divided into 3 different pillars. So the first is research. When we first started 5 years ago, we found out that there were many information or science that were not around. So there were a lot of data gaps, data deficient. So we couldn't really inform sound evidence in terms of conservation and management options when there was so little science that was there in Malaysia. So 5 years ago, we started to increase more research that is centered to more informing conservation outcomes. And apart from that, we also engage with markets and consumers. So this is very much working with the industry players, looking at sustainable sourcing of seafood, working with markets so that they could adopt more responsible consumption pattern and practices. And last but not least, we also work on policy advocacy. We try to mainstream conservation for sharks and ray within the fishery sectors and as well as within the marine spatial management. Sharks and ray, they are often just considered as bycatch and they receive very little attention when it comes to within the fishery sectors. And that is one thing that we would like to mainstream within the national policies. So I'll just speak about one part of our work. So I'll be focusing more on the research priorities. So there were many data gaps that I've mentioned earlier that we don't have here in Malaysia. So for the past 5 years, we've been trying to improve these data gaps by working with universities, local partners, and communities as well to improve our understanding of the species in Malaysia. So these research priorities are supposed to inform various approach in terms of conservation. So first of all is research in the areas where we could identify priority areas. And these are areas where are critical habitat for the species, where they aggregate or even nursery ground for some of the threatened species. For more effective area-based conservation and management, we talk about 30 by 30 goal, establishing more protected areas as a means to protect the species. But more importantly is we should be prioritizing our resources for effective management as well. So not just looking at protecting species, looking in MPAs, but also looking at very effective measures, how we can improve MPA effectiveness for some of the species. And secondly, our research also centered around improving ways for us to monitor species, improve enforcement and policy recommendations as well. We try different methods to identify species on the ground, and this is inclusive of DNA barcoding. These are genetic approaches that we use on the ground. Currently, we're also using environmental DNA approach. So basically, it takes water samples from the sea, and we try to detect occurrence species in the water. So I'm trying to find out what are the most rapid ways that we could identify species in our water. So this could actually facilitate or improve monitoring efforts for the longer term. And finally, we talk about a lot about the threats on overfishing. So a lot of our research is also prioritizing how can we identify tangible solutions or feasible solutions within the fisheries management in reducing these incidental catches. So I'll be talking, just showing a case study that we have in TMP. So TMP is situated within the north tip of Sabah. It's one of the largest multi-use park in Malaysia. So you can see here, it's quite a small map. So we're very close to the Philippines, and this is close to 1 million hectares wide of protected area. So it is one of the largest collaborative managed local communities marine park in Malaysia, and there's about 85,000 people that depends on this area for fishing ground. And is also a rich biodiversity area in terms of coral reef fishes, sea turtles, and sharks and ray. And we're also listed as part of the IUCN Green List. The team in TMP is taking the necessary step to be listed, and that is one of the efforts. So within TMP, we've monitored sharks and rays through underwater monitoring system, but I would like to focus more from the human perspective, where we work with fishermen. So a lot of time when we talk about sharks and ray, we talk about commercial fisheries being the most significant contributor of bycatch, but a lot of them and so in many cases, in artisanal fishery or small scale fisheries, they're often overlooked and not being represented as one of the majority of the communities that we should be working with. So the majority of communities in TMP consists of this artisanal fishermen that uses gill nets, hook and lines as a means to fish in the area. So it was very important for us to work with them, because these are stewards of the ocean and they have very important local ecological knowledge of sharks and ray in the area. So for about 2 years, we've been exploring with the communities, having in-depth interview sessions with them, and primarily just to understand what has changed over the years in terms of their primary catch, but also at the same time understanding what are some of the shark and ray species that have been caught in the area, and also understanding what sort of fishing practices that actually influence the rates or the bycatch rates in the area. But more importantly, we take social inclusion approach very important as part of our work to explore different fishing bycatch mitigation measures in the area. So we explore their local knowledge, their different perceptions, and as well as their behavior, motivations to either stop catching sharks and ray or even participate some of the mitigation efforts that we have. So a lot of our efforts we're really interacting with the fishermen, establishing relationship with them, but also exploring what are the most feasible solutions for us to reduce bycatch in small-scale fisheries. So these are just some of the examples. So fishermen in TMP, they are very friendly and they are very open. What we found out is they are very open to work with us. And it is a male-dominated industry, but of course, women, they play a role as well in most of the household. Most of the women sell their catches in the market, so they are also impacted by the industry as well. But many of these fishermen, they understood how important it is to protect sharks and rays. So we were very quite surprised of the level of knowledge that these communities actually have. So three of the outcomes that we had in our study in understanding what are the tangible solutions that we can start working with these communities to reduce threats to sharks and ray is, first of all, having live release program for juvenile and threatened species. So many of the fishermen, they are inclined to release them if they're small, and they do recognize some of the threatened species. So live release programs are very feasible given with enough trainings and as well as guide to the local communities. And second of all is incentive program for participatory reporting bycatch. TMP is such a huge area, and so understanding the local catches or monitoring the local catches is very, very crucial, and as well as it's very hard to understand the catch without, I would say, without a local community participating. So what we did was we held a workshop for some of these fishermen, and women were also invited. Some of these women, they do sell catches, and so they understood what sort of fish catch were caught in the area, we provide basic training of identification. So some of the species, they look alike. And so providing capacity building for fishers to identify species correctly was the first step we did with the communities, so they could report better catches, report more accurate information in terms of bycatch, and as well as I will try to promote incentive programs for successful live releases as well. And some of these recommendations were accepted by the communities because these are very feasible at an implementation level. And thirdly, for a longer term solution is, of course, implementing small trials of mitigations. So there are many different ways that we are mitigating bycatch using technologies, using different methods of fishing, but that is for a longer term solution where we can establish better, I would say, working relationship with the communities. But more importantly, I would like to leave here is that a lot of these communities are important for us to engage, and these are the people that could make changes on the ground. Without them, nothing could actually happen. So a lot of them needs to participate, and as well as encouraged to be part of the solution making. So many of them actually came up solutions themselves, recommending what they can do to actually reduce bycatch in the area. So it's really important and enlightening that how so many communities actually take up this initiative on their own. And so for us at WWF Malaysia is for us to facilitate and as well providing the necessary guideline and funding so that these programs could last a longer term. But in a more, I would say, general sense for everyone who's watching, I think a lot of people can take part in shark and ray conservation. And the first step is definitely getting involved in research, contributing to the collection of information and even citizen science to inform management and policy advocacy. This is just to show you that the WWF had produced a toolkit, and this toolkit consists of various methods that everyone could, practitioners and citizen science can actually know more about it. And these are free to download at the website. There's a link that I shared below. So this is an open source toolkit that everyone can access to. And also to introduce the SARI program, which is the Shark and Ray Recovery Initiative, is one of the most largest collaborative work between WWF, WCS, James Cook Universities, and as well as I think Erasmus project. Yep, and this is it's a resource hub as well for for countries to recover species that are most threatened within the respective country. And so there are many resources and toolkits for people to start looking at it. So if you're interested how you could contribute to Sharks and Ray Recovery Initiative, there are many resources out there, and these are some of the platforms that I like to sort of just throwing out there as a start that people could start looking at. So I would like to end my presentation by just a shout out to all the women's. Like I've mentioned earlier in my presentation, I work in a very women-dominated industry. A women-dominated conservation group. Working in a male-dominated industry where most of the fishers are males. So most of our women, they come from different backgrounds. And so this is just a shout out for all of them that have contributed in our work. And as well as I hope there are more longer collaboration with more women out there to advance conservation of sharks and rays in Malaysia. So thank you very much. And that's at the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena, for your excellent presentation, very informative, and highlighting the decline of the shark and ray population with 1/3, quite alarming, and particularly through bycatch, but also habitat loss, climate change, and pollution. But it's great to learn more about WWF Malaysia's approach and how you deal with that, particularly on the bycatch issue, and more related to specific activities in Tun Mustafa Park and through community engagement. So a lot of lessons learned from us on how to address it, and very much appreciate the additional resources on how people can engage in shark and ray recoveries. So we're almost at the end of our webinar, and very happy that we still have time to show you the feature story about Women's Association of Omadal Island, or Persatuan Wanita Pulau Omadal, from in Sempurna, Malaysia. And it's the story of Rosita Jalalit, and she is the chairperson of the Women's Association of Omadal, WAPO. And she has been involved in community engagement, outreach, and capacity building for marine conservation in Sabah, Malaysia, since the beginning. And WAPO started to involve the women in community, in the community to preserve the natural marine resources in 2010. And she tells the story also about how the community produces handicraft as a side income, and 10% of the sales are distributed to the Conservation Fund. And through WAPO, the women lead patrolling of the seas for turtle egg collection and to teach the youth to care for the marine environment. So enjoy this beautiful video as concluding a feature story for this very inspiring webinar. Thank you.
Nama saya Rujia Jalalid. Saya berasal dari suku kaum Bajau dari Omadal Sempurna. Kami tinggal di Pulau Omadal ini sudah 3 generasi. Sebagai orang Bajau, hidup kami dengan laut tak boleh dipisahkan. Laut adalah sumber makanan dan ekonomi kami. Dari dulu sampai sekarang, saya melihat banyak perubahan di Pulau Omadal. Cuaca semakin panas, ikan pun berkurangan, dan pencemaran semakin teruk. 5 tahun lepas, kami jumpai 14 sarang penyu. Sekarang ada 4 saja. Bila suhu pasir terlalu tinggi, hanya telur penyu betina terhasil. Jadi, kuranglah penyu-penyu yang ada di masa depan. WAPO ditubuhkan pada tahun 2010 untuk melibatkan kaum wanita memelihara sumber alam secara mapan. Komuniti juga aktif membuat kerap tangan sebagai pendapatan sampingan, dan 10% hasil daripada kerap tangan disalurkan kepada tabung konservasi. Melalui WAPO, kaum wanita sebagai ketua menjalankan aktiviti patrolling sekeliling pantai untuk mencari telur penyu dan mengajar aktiviti kesedaran untuk kanak-kanak. Saya rasa Pulau Omadal memerlukan kawasan lindungan marin untuk menjaga sumber laut, seperti terumbu karang, ikan dan penyu dari pemburu haram dan pengembuban ikan. Manusia sendirilah yang tidak perhatian dan bertanggung jawab yang merusakkan sumber asli kita. Coba kamu bayangkan, kalau anak-anak kita berenang dalam sampah, apa akan terjadi? Kalau kita bekerja sama sebagai satu community dan mengajar anak-anak kita, pasti laut boleh kembali seperti dulu. Saya Rojia dan saya seorang ocean witness.
Well, thank you, Rosia Jalalit, for this beautiful personal ocean witness feature story. And that concludes our last speaker for this webinar. And I realize we have very little time or no time actually for questions, but I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to make a statement or a question. We can still do that now if you like. We definitely will share the PowerPoints to everyone from this webinar, and also exchange email addresses if you like to continue this learning exchange. We also have a second series scheduled in the first week of November. So another webinar on women in the front lines of marine conservation in the Coral Triangle. So I do like to thank my co-organizers, CTI-CFF, Dr. Kushari, Dr. Lizzie McLeod from the Nature Conservancy, and Virginie from Mary Kay for supporting this webinar, and all our amazing speakers from the region. Thanks so much for sharing your very inspiring stories, so much information and knowledge that we can use for our own programs in our respective projects. So again, I'd like to thank Madeline from the Solomon Islands, Irina from the Philippines, thank you, Elle from Indonesia, Serena from Malaysia, and Rosia Jalalit from Sabah, Malaysia as well. Maybe we can make one group photo if you can turn off all your videos. And just to summarize quickly, I think the key messages from all of us is about the importance of community engagement and how pivotal they are to make real change on the ground. And that is supported by science, by policy, by advocacy, but it's all about the inclusion of every member of the community to make a difference and to really help make change in this region to address the staggering rate of destruction of the marine biodiversity and the endangered species like sharks and rays in the Coral Triangle. So I do like to thank you all for your contribution, your commitment, and the wealth of information you shared with us. And as Lizzie said, these learning exchanges are pivotal. We continue to learn from each other, and we can adjust our strategies along the way. And maybe Lizzie, would you like to say a few last words on behalf of the Nature Conservancy?
Thanks, really. Just thank you all so much for joining. And for me, this was just an awesome opportunity to hear from some phenomenal women from art, comics, science, being on the front lines, working with communities. It's just fantastic, the breadth of the work that you're doing, and just my huge gratitude for all of the great work and the great conservation outcomes. It wouldn't happen without you getting up every morning and doing what you do. So from the bottom of our hearts, from all of us at TNC, CTC, CTI, CFF, thank you. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Great. Thanks so much, Lizzie. Okay, so we'll have our photo now taken. Thanks. Great. Stay in touch with all of you, and thanks so much again for your fabulous presentations. Very inspiring, and look forward to see you in November. If you can join us again for the second series in this series of women and the front lines of marine conservation. Thanks so much. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.